How much Bitcoin do you need to hold to be in the top 1%? The top 1% of people in the world, the top 1% of current Bitcoin holders. We'll be going through that here today. And, at the end of the day, this is a fun video to make, but even if you're at the top 1%, you might want to stack more. Even if you can't get to 1% based on how much money you make, maybe some debts, your lifestyle, I still think it's important to have goals set in place. So take this video with a grain of salt, but it'll be really interesting to break down some of these numbers. Please hit subscribe before we get started. Stay through to the end of the video because we'll be looking at different scenarios. Also, if you want to check out the link underneath the video to Margex, you can start trading on Margex and hopefully grow your stack of Bitcoin or an altcoin a bit bigger. And you can do that without having to KYC, which means you don't have to put in a bunch of your personal information. You don't have to use a VPN. They're doing a big hamster airdrop right now that goes on for a little bit longer in case you just want to trade and you hit the join now button, you automatically get registered in this. There's also a link to CoinW as well underneath the video if you want to trade spot crypto. If you just want a place to buy crypto, you can use CoinW, or if you want to trade via futures, you can do that over on CoinW. They're also giving away a bunch of TON token. So check those links out underneath the video. Now, Bitcoin is starting to do better. People are starting to pay attention to it again. For a while there, around the 4th of July, early July, just in general, people were freaked out because we fell down to about 53,000. And then, for the people that want to stack and buy more Bitcoin, it was great. It didn't last very long, but it was great because you're getting a 15 to 20% discount from a few weeks earlier. But for everyone that has accumulated enough, in their mind, enough Bitcoin, well, a lot of them freaked out thinking, well, I could have bought the Bitcoin that I bought back here. I could have bought it at 53,000. Some people were worried because maybe they got a little bit too aggressive and they bought too much and now they were just seeing their net worth go down. But just breathe because we're moving back up. This is going to be a cycle that you're going to have some mental fortitude for. You're going to have some resilience, and you're going to have a strong resolve. As you can see, we're starting to move back up, and a lot of people have stacking goals. They want to get to half a Bitcoin, a quarter of Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, maybe 1 Bitcoin, maybe 10 Bitcoin. It's different for everyone based on your own assets, based on when you start buying, and based on your income. But what would it take to become the top 1%? People love hearing about the 1%. They want to know how they make so much money. They want to know how they were able to buy so many properties, what kind of strategies they've implemented. So we'll be going through what it takes to get to the top 1% in a couple different ways, because there are various ways to talk about the top 1%. Now, the top 1% of Bitcoin holders, let's just think about it here. We'll start here. Scenario 1. There are about 8 billion people in the world. There will ever only be 21 million Bitcoin, okay? So if we take the top 1% of the 8 billion people, that's 80 million. Okay, 1% of 8 billion, 80 million. If we just distribute that 21 million Bitcoin evenly, that would give about every 1%er about 0.25 Bitcoin. Now, there's somewhere around 60 to 80 million millionaires in the world, too. It might be higher now. It was 55 million a couple of years ago when the stat came out. I'd guess it's probably close to 80 to 100 million millionaires now. So it's right on track with that top 1%. Really, if you want to be a top 1%er, or if you're looking at the top 1%, let's say, you're looking at millionaires, like just $1 million status. Now, for a lot of millionaires, one quarter of a Bitcoin is still a sizable purchase. I know it sounds crazy, but that's a $15,000 or $16,000 purchase right now into a speculative asset. The normal millionaire, I don't know if they necessarily have $15,000 to $20,000 to put into a speculative asset. I'd say about half of them probably do, but we have a lot of millionaires that have money tied up in 401ks. They have money tied up in their home. They have money tied up in a business. So a $15,000 or $20,000, again, a $15,000 or $20,000 expense, it's probably doable, throughout a year to be able to get up to that quarter Bitcoin, but it's not like a lot of them can just go splurge $20,000 on a quarter of a Bitcoin. So keep that in mind. Even the top 1%, it would take some effort to get to that quarter Bitcoin. But the fact is, this is not a perfect world. That 21 million Bitcoin will never be evenly distributed between the top 1% because the top 1%, the top 1 of 1%, oftentimes buys more than their allotted equal share of Bitcoin. Let's look at this. The amount of Bitcoin on exchanges is just 2.5 million Bitcoin. Now, keep in mind, there are people that don't have Bitcoin on exchanges that would be willing to sell at a certain point. There are some people that will never sell. There are people that lost their Bitcoin as well. So I'd say those are kind of like the three categories. People that are willing to sell, either now or at a future higher price. People that are never willing to sell because they think, why would I do that? I have to then pay taxes. I'll just let it sit there forever. And then the people that lost their Bitcoin. So let's say all this Bitcoin is held by people that are willing to sell. Now, not all of them are. Some people just hold it on exchanges because it's easier. But let's say all that 2.5 million Bitcoin are people willing to sell. And we're going to say there's another 5 million Bitcoin from people that are willing to sell at certain prices. Okay, maybe it's 80,000, maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 200,000, maybe it's at a certain time. But we'll say there's 7.5 million Bitcoin that are being, are held by people willing to sell. And there are 8 billion people. That means that everyone on this earth could buy about 0.00094 Bitcoin. Okay, so that's not a lot of Bitcoin. If we go by the top 1%, that's about 0.1 Bitcoin. Because keep in mind, like I said, there are 21 million, or there will be 21 million. Not all of them are mined yet. Some of them are lost, and some people just aren't willing to sell. This is, I think, a little bit generous with how much people would actually be willing to sell. Right? That's maybe half of the overall supply based on the Bitcoin that's also been lost over the years. Maybe there's 4 or 5 million Bitcoin lost. So maybe there's really only 15 million Bitcoin in circulation right now that haven't been lost. So half of it is willing to be sold to the top 1%. So we're talking about 0.1 Bitcoin each, which at today's prices is about $6,500, maybe more or less by the time you're watching this. Now, that's great. But what about if we want to be in the top 1% of the people that already hold Bitcoin? Because there are a lot of people that will never touch Bitcoin. At least now, right? Maybe Bitcoin becomes the global reserve currency. People continue to feel more comfortable with it and it changes. But there are a lot of people right now that don't hold Bitcoin. So let's look at the Bitcoin distribution. Let's say you want to become a top 1% holder. And we're going to do this based on wallets. So some people have a lot of wallets, just to be clear, like some people have 10, 20, 50, 100 different wallets. But if you want to have a wallet that's in the top 1% for how much Bitcoin it holds, you need somewhere between 1 and 10 Bitcoin in there. It doesn't show on the Bitcoin rich list or Bitcoin distribution the exact amount, but probably around 2 or 3 Bitcoin. And again, this isn't perfect because there are some people that have multiple Bitcoin in multiple wallet addresses too. Like if you have 10,000 Bitcoin, maybe you have 10 different wallets. So it doesn't tell you exactly how many people have more than you or less than you, but it tells you you're in the top 1% of wallets. Like your wallet balance is more than 99% of Bitcoin wallets out there. So that's a pretty lofty goal compared to some of these other goals, right? This is maybe 2 Bitcoin, which is expensive now. It's $130,000. Most millionaires cannot afford $130,000 into a more risk-on investment. Some people will argue and say that Bitcoin's not risk-on, but as you can just see, like the volatility is very high. You can go from $70,000 to $15,000, $16,000. So anything that draws down 80%, I think, relatively high risk, high reward, right? High volatility. Same thing here. I mean, you can see just in a few days going up 13, 14%. That's pretty high volatility. So overall, at the end of the day, if you want to be a 1%er, it depends on what you're looking at. Do you want to be a 1%er based on, how much Bitcoin is actually available? Do you want to be a 1%er based on all the Bitcoin that's out there? Do you want to be a 1%er based on the available data that we have on wallets right now? Like, do you want a top 1% wallet? At the end of the day, I think this is interesting to look at. But again, a lot of it will come down to your own life. Like, how much can you afford to buy without driving yourself crazy? A lot of people say, well, I can afford a quarter of a Bitcoin or a tenth of a Bitcoin. But maybe it's still too much of their portfolio size to where mentally they can't handle that kind of volatility. Their net worth is $10,000 one day, $12,000 the next, $8,000 the next, that kind of thing. That wouldn't necessarily happen with Bitcoin if you had 0.1 Bitcoin, but you get that in altcoins more often. And even with Bitcoin, the volatility can go up and cause people to make irrational decisions. It feels like for a while, if Bitcoin's price goes down, your net worth is going down day after day, even when you're making money at your day job, right? So some people can't handle that volatility, but if you have a long-term investment horizon, if you're willing to take profits during a bull run, and I guess it depends on how you view it too. Is this a legacy asset that you're going to hold for 20 years, or are you going to try to, pull some lifestyle chips off the table during a bull run? That's something that I'm going to be doing. I'm even going to sell some of my Bitcoin. I know it's crazy, but it's a large percentage of my portfolio, and it will be life-changing money for me as we move up. So I'm going to take some lifestyle chips off the table, but that's kind of up to you how you want to play this cycle. If you can get to one of these numbers, one of the top 1% numbers, you're probably going to do well over time. But again, if you're top 1%, if you hold, let's say 0.1 Bitcoin, you're not going to retire on that, but it could be a great start to your financial journey. It could be a great addition to your financial journey. Let me know your thoughts on this underneath the video. Do you think it's going to be affordable for the average investor or even the average 1%er? Let's say a millionaire. Is it going to be doable for the millionaire to go buy a quarter of a Bitcoin one day? Right now, I think we're on the edge. Right? Some might be able to afford a $15,000 more speculative, high risk, high beta investment. Some, I don't think they have the bandwidth. I don't think they have the ability because they don't have the liquidity to do that. Let me know your thoughts though. The Bitcoin ETFs definitely help too, because you could buy through retirement accounts. You could go through 401k or a Roth IRA and buy some. You could buy a tenth of a Bitcoin relatively easy at this point right now. At least friction-wise, right? It's relatively easy to buy these ETFs. So based on the annual contribution, you could buy a tenth of a Bitcoin based on 2024 maximum limits in an IRA, for example. Kind of interesting, right? You could invest in that, get the gains tax-free. Let's say Bitcoin goes to $2 million one day. You have $200K then from your tenth of a Bitcoin. I don't know. It's crazy to think about that. But it would be very nice, I think, to have a couple $100,000 or even more in a Roth IRA one day. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to trade cryptocurrency, there's a link to MargeX and CoinW underneath the video. In case you want a Bitcoin Nashville ticket, there are some links underneath the video where if you use my code, you can get an extra 10% off. Take a look at this little promo video for them.
To the nation's 50 million crypto holders, I will support the right to self-custody, and I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
All right, so you can get the tickets underneath the video. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.